Hello everybody and welcome to Cities Skylines 2, where as you can see, I have expanded this area up here off camera again, as it was before the crash, and unfortunately, I have some bad news. The bad news is that the crash is persisting. So if we were to run this, as it is right now, it'll crash in just a matter of seconds from unpausing the game. Now, I don't know if that's related to this area up over here. Every time it has crashed, this area has existed. We could go back to a previous save and just not develop this area and see if that fixes it. It's a possibility. For whatever reason, I did a look in the logs, and the crash appears to be related to some sort of pathfinding code. So it would make sense that a road expansion up here could theoretically cause something like that. So that might be it. Now, I'm going to run the game here, and we expect it to crash. So, let's crash it. It should crash in moments here. There it goes. Okay, so yep, it crashes just like that. And this is happening consistently. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to pause the recording here. We're going to come back, and we're going to try it back at the previous save to see if it crashes without that section expanded. So we'll see how that ends up going. I'll see you guys once that's loaded up. Okay, here we are loaded up, and I need to tell OBS to look at this instance of City Skylines. There we go. And we don't have anything out over here, as you can see. The question now is, and I probably should have tried that before starting this recording, but I just thought of it as I was starting the recording. I've tried a lot of things, by the way. I've fully reinstalled the game. I've done a lot of things, for the record. But we'll see if this works, because we were able to proceed with the game until after this was built, right? On the previous episode. But now it's crashing at the beginning. So let's see if we crash here. If we do, we did. Okay. So we're just hard crashing. And that pretty much means, well, let me load it up one more time and I'll tell you what that means after that's done. See you guys in just a moment. So here we are all loaded up again. And pretty much what that means is that this is a show-stopping bug for us. I really hate to say that. I was planning on getting ourselves some more freight going on down here and further expanding our subway network once we get to rank 17. But we can't unpause at this point without crashing the game. And all of the save games appear to have the same issue. I don't know about a new game that may or may not have this issue. But to be honest, with a showstopper bug like this, I'll usually just let the game sit until a big new patch comes out, and then maybe we can try again. So that's unfortunately about where we are. So we're going to have to put a stop to it here. I really, really don't want to do that. It makes me so sad because there's so much more I want to do with this, and we definitely could do a lot more. Now I'm going to unpause it very briefly here before it crashes, and we're just going to take it to the actual time of day. There we go. Now, as far as the traffic goes, I think that our traffic is solved at least until the morning rush hour. Of course, we're not going to get to the morning rush hour, and the question is, what is even the point of continuing the episode beyond here, right? I can't just, in good conscience, make the series just end after the last crash, so I want to make this one last episode, like, wrapping it up, right? But what can we do at this point? Well, we can talk a bit about the state of the game. We can definitely do that. So, what is my opinion on the state of Cities Skylines 2 at this point, now that I've gotten reasonably deep in? So, obviously the show-stopping bug is a problem, right? 100%. That's something that we cannot ignore. We can't proceed at this point. And to be clear, I've done a lot of digging through the logs. I've done a lot of updating various things. I have no idea what caused this bug to begin, and we just don't have time to solve it. This is not, from what I can tell, something that is being done by the Cities Skylines 2 code. Well, not by the code within Unity anyway. This is being done in a native DLL file, so probably the pathfinding is done in like C++ or something like that. And Yeah, that's the core issue right now, is something in that sort of an extension library. This is not something that we're able to fix from what I can tell at this point. Colossal Order would have to do that. So that's obviously a problem, right? 100% that is an issue. But discounting that, up until this point, let's talk about the state of the game. So there are, I think, some good things, absolutely, about Cities Skylines 2. There's some things I really, really like about it. For example, I do like, broadly, the way that the road building works, now that I've figured it out. It was a bit of a process to figure out how it works, but I think it could be better, absolutely. I've outlined before that the way I would like to do it is to have individual control of lanes for things like turn directions, for things like speed limits. That would be a really good thing. And if we were able to have an arbitrary number of lanes on either side of the median and we could just extend it out a lane whenever we needed to, that would be amazing. I would really, really like that. The terraformation system is simple, but I think it mostly does what it needs to do, at least for my purposes. I'm sure there are some people who want to go all in on the terraformation. To those people, it's probably too simple. I am not those people, and for me, it suits my purposes. I think it's reasonably fine. I think it's very strange that it's free, but given the kind of frustrating nature of connecting things like overpass on-ramps, I get why it's free. That could get very expensive very quickly if it wasn't. Do I think that it will remain free forever? Possibly not, but I mean, honestly, we know at this point that Cities Skylines 2 is a half-baked game, right? We know at this point that it was basically forced out and that it was too early. It was released too early. That is definitely true. Performance is an issue. I think that that's something that we should definitely say. Like, on my system right now, it's running okay. It's not great. By any means. It is certainly not great, especially when we, like, get in and start loading in the... Ooh, yeah, like, look at that. That was very not great. It needs work in a lot of areas. Now, a couple of game design areas, because I don't want to harp too much on, like, the technical side of it, because I think that that's a problem that will get fixed during time. In terms of the game design side of it, I think there are some glaring omissions right now, such as things like water pumping trucks. As you're playing around with things like reforming water, it becomes extremely messy with the way that the water system works in this game. And to be clear, that was also the case in Cities Skylines 1. The way that the water flows in this game, I think, is a little bit better than in Cities Skylines 1. But the main problem there is when you have water that pools in an area, it just sits there. It doesn't evaporate, and you have to make it flow away into a different body of water to make it go away. That's a bit of a problem, because in Cities Skylines 1, it would eventually evaporate if you just left it there. Eventually. It would take some time, but it would eventually evaporate. It would also, in Cities Skylines 1, be able to be pumped away by pumping trucks. And that is the thing that I think is really missing right now in Cities Skylines 1 as far as water goes. So pumping trucks, I think, are something that definitely need to be added to the game. That is going to be a fairly big deal, especially if they start doing things like big storms that cause water accumulations and things like that. That's going to be very, very important. Or like burst water pipes. Things like this are things that could definitely be added that would be interesting, but would definitely require a way to do that. Other things that I think are interesting ideas in terms of game design, but are not necessarily implemented super well, is the relationship between the different types of residential demand. Now, maybe I just didn't get far enough into the game. That is quite possible. Keep in mind, we have a city of 73,000, right? So that is very possible that that is the case. If that is indeed the case, that we just didn't get far enough, fine. But I think that City Skylines 1 allowed you to transition more quickly into high-density residential, so you don't end up with this absolutely sprawling residential area. Now, this is a little bit more realistic, to be sure, but there's a severe lack of high-density residential demand to the point where I feel like we just can't zone it. At least not yet. Maybe that changes later on. But you also notice that there is no similar demand breakdown in low and high density commercial. That works like it did in City Skylines 1. And that is, well, almost. It almost works like in City Skylines 1. But there's still actually a hidden demand for it that isn't actually shown. Because there are times where I don't know what they're called in this game. The people in this game. I guess we'll call them that. There are times when the people will start to develop a low-density commercial area, but they will not develop a high-density commercial area. We experienced that earlier on in the game. At this point, that's less of an issue. So there's definitely an internal breakdown there that's not communicated to us, and that I don't like. I don't think that that is a good thing. I do like the fact that they broke apart industrial and office demand. It was always a little bit strange in City Skylines 1 to make a zero pollution city by just spamming offices everywhere. That was a very viable thing in City Skylines 1, and I'm kind of glad that it isn't in this game. So that's going to force me in future series to think more strongly about where we put our initial industrial zone. Because essentially, we're going to want our industrial zone, and by extension our commercial zone, to be somewhere that is fairly easily accessible for freight cargo, right? So that means that we don't want to clog up our highways with freight, which currently is what we see. And that was the point behind building the shipyard down here. And then this highway would be a direct line for our freight yard. That was the idea there. Of course, rail would be another good way to handle that. Rail is an excellent way to handle that, but we don't have a rail connection as far as I know. We might be able to create a rail connection somewhere, but if we do, I don't know how to do that. So that is a possibility, but I do like that. I like that definitely, because that does force us to do things differently, and that's a good thing. That is a very good thing, forcing us to think very carefully about where we want to put our industrial area. Because we have two factors there. We have to have both freight input, and we have to be thinking about where we want our air pollution to go, right? So currently the air pollution is heading up this way, which, you know, is kind of polluting our water source. But whatever, it's absolutely fine. I'm sure it's okay. We can look at our traffic map here and we can see, yeah, broadly, this is pretty decent. Even the traffic jam area is considered to be, well, this is actually road condition. Our roads are kept in pretty good condition, it would appear, broadly. So yeah, I think this is a very good base for an excellent city builder. I think that it came out too early. I think it should have been delayed at least 6 months to a year, somewhere in there. I think that's very, very clear. And I think that there are definitely a few missing features. Another thing that is, like, it compounds the issue that I have with the residential densities is the way that the education works, specifically elementary schools. Elementary schools are intended to be within walking distance. And that means that we end up, and we don't have that right now, but that means that we end up massively overbuilding elementary school capacity because of the size of residential in this low-density residential. Now, to be clear, that's not the worst thing in the world. It just compounds it together, right? And ultimately, that would be less of a problem if we had high-density residential, but we don't. And that's not really a viable thing for us to do here. Now, another thing that I would like to talk about before we go here, and this is probably going to end up being a short episode. Another thing that I would like to talk about a bit is the way that the dams end up working. Now, our dams are put together in a really awkward way because of the low water level issue that we had. And if we look at our elevation here, we can see, yeah, it's real low right by the dams, and that's because you apparently need an exceptionally high depth in order to not get a malus on your energy production. That is an awkward thing. No doubt about that. That's something that I think needs to be addressed. Another thing that I would like to see addressed is this issue out over here, where we have these houses being abandoned over here, and the reason that they are being abandoned is because of their noise pollution. So we can see here, there's noise pollution. Here there is not. Here there is not. Here there is not. Here there is. Why? What particular reason is there that this house has noise pollution and all of the houses neighboring it do not? That is, I think, a bug and something that needs to be either addressed or made more clear why this is happening, if it's not a bug. So that's all well and good, right? I feel like that's a lot of negatives, and we can talk a bit about, well, the other negative that we've talked about a lot already is the vehicle pathfinding, right? Which appears to be what's causing this crash that is causing us to end this series. It's not perfect, no doubt about it. Vehicle pathfinding, particularly around roundabouts, is very awkward. More specifically, it's the lane-changing behavior that is causing the issues there. So, I mean, that's a pretty long list of things that I think needs to be worked on, right? No doubt about that, it's a pretty long list of things. But I think there's a lot of good here, too. But broadly, a lot of that good comes from the Cities Skylines DNA, not necessarily from being Cities Skylines 2. So the question has to be asked, is there a point in playing Cities Skylines 2 in its current state when Cities Skylines 1 exists? That is an interesting question that basically brings us back to the KSP position, right? Where Cities Skylines 2 is kind of a downgrade, except graphically. But that has performance issues, which KSP 2, I believe, also had some performance issues, although I think those have been ironed out. We'll revisit that one soon. That is not going to be following this series, by the way. That might be following next series, but I'll be honest, I'm kind of struggling here to come up with, like, really solid good things to say about Cities Skylines 2. I think that there's a lot of good under-the-hood things in Cities Skylines 2. I think it's a stronger engine than Cities Skylines 1 was. It's a better foundation. But the game that is currently built on that foundation, I think, is not an upgrade over what was on the old foundation, which is why I say that it was released too early. That is my conclusion here, and that's basically what it comes down to. There's a lot that I do like about the overall engine and the way it works. The lane selection is, I think, a big, big weak spot. Underground construction gets a little awkward, although I like the way it works for pipes and electric lines. I think that that's very, very solid. I like splitting out high-end voltage electricity. I think that's a very good thing. And let's see, sewage disposal is basically the same. So is water pumping. The crematorium issue that we had in the early game was an interesting one, but that seems to have solved itself, where people are mostly not waiting for hearses anymore, which is also very interesting. I do like the fact that you can empty, like, you can get rid of cemeteries a lot easier. You don't have to empty them first. That's what I'm trying to say. There we go. That's a good thing. There are a lot of extraordinarily large buildings in Cities Skylines 2, that's for sure. And I think in a lot of city designs, that's absolutely fine. In this city design, it kind of breaks things a bit. But that's okay. We don't necessarily expect things to work perfectly in a city design like this. So yeah, that's basically the conclusions that I'm coming to right now. I have mixed feelings about Cities Skylines 2 and returning to it. Performance gains would be nice. On my level of hardware, I feel like it's not strictly necessary, but it would be good. It would absolutely be a good thing, and I mean, we're not achieving a solid 60 FPS all the time. That's no doubt about that. 100% that is true. We're not achieving a solid 60, but it's good enough for a city builder, broadly. I'd like to be achieving more, no doubt about it, but it is a technical challenge to render all of this. No doubt about that either. So yeah, very mixed. That's what it comes down to. I have a very, very mixed opinion on this game. I think that there are a lot of good foundational things here, but the specific implementations of a lot of things I think are deeply flawed and need to be worked on. I don't think they're irreparably flawed, to be clear. There are some games where I look at it and I'm like, throw it in the bin. Needs to be over. Just start over. That's your best bet. I don't think that's necessarily the case with Cities Skylines 2. I think that Cities Skylines 2 is, as I said, an excellent foundation for a very good game. One that a foundation that needs more work, and the game built on top of that foundation needs a fair amount of work. The biggest things that it needs work on is road construction, which is, I think, a little too janky right now. Pathfinding, that's a big one. Traffic pathfinding is paramount in a game like this, and it's not great right now. They either need to fix the lane changing behavior, or we need to have specific, like, traffic manager style control over each lane. That's what it comes down to. And then there's things like the building size. I can forgive that. We can get over that. That's just a design difference that I have with the devs. That's a personal thing. I don't really care about that all that much. So that's basically my conclusions, what I'm coming down to as of right now. Now, this might change. If you're watching this 6 months in the future, this is probably a very different game. If you're watching it a year in the future, hopefully a different game. I'm hoping that they're not going to just abandon it. If they do, Cities Skylines 1 is the way to go, to be clear. If they don't abandon it, in 6 months to a year, this could be very, very solid. Fingers crossed on that one. And I think that's enough of me babbling on about the quality of this game or lack thereof. I think it's very clear what I have issues with here, and your issues might differ with mine, and that's okay. But this game is definitely very imperfect. Very, very, very imperfect. It needs some work. It needs some love. And we have no choice at this point but to give them the time to give the game that love. So I'm going to have to end this series here, and we're going to end it with yet another crash. The game is just going to crash the moment I unpause this, or not exactly the moment. It's like 5 to 10 seconds after, depending on how fast we run it. But we're going to be ending the series here due to this show-stopping bug, and there's just nothing we can do about it at this point. We'll just have to stop here. We don't have time to continue to troubleshoot this without the video being late, so here we are. I have no idea yet what the series that's going to follow this is. We'll see what the council members have to say about that, and an announcement will be forthcoming probably tomorrow from the day that this video... Actually, probably today from the day that this video goes live. You can leave your offerings to the engagement gods in the form of likes, comments, subscribes, and bell ringings, and a very special thank you to all of the channel members for making this video possible, including ALS Gamer, Shadow Wolf, Kentogan, Ali Lee, Upper Cumberland Gamers, Nick Smarty, Dimitri H, Punching the Microphone, Soccerman12 UK, and all the rest. And of course, you. Thank you for watching. If you'd like to support the channel, you can click the join button down below the video, and as always, I will see you all next time. Let's get that one more crash going here. Let's go. There we go. Oh, see you all next time.